Good morning, and welcome to this brand new episode of the Silmarillion Film Project. I'm your co-host, Dave Kale, coming to you live, if you're listening live, I guess, from the heart of Hollywood, California, from my office at Netflix. So that's kind of exciting and fun and different. So you may hear background noise when I'm talking. And of course, I'm excited to be here since I missed the last one. Apologies for that. And also excited to share a little bit about this past weekend's LA moot, which was fun and kind of an adventure, both the moot itself and all the planning and organization that led up to it. Right, Corey?
Oh yeah, that was great.
Yeah,
No,
that was a great.
Everything all came together.
Yeah, a couple weeks out, it was canceled at one point, and then it was uncanceled. Yeah, it was great. So. Anyway, let's get started. I am joined as always, and it's these days it's been a little tumultuous. So sometimes it's actually been kind of rare recently to have all three of us. But this morning you have all three of us. I'm joined as always by Corey Olson, the Tolkien professor, and Trish Lambert, the Tolkien maven.
Okay, good morning, everybody. How are you doing, Trish?
I was sitting and listening to you talk, Dave. I was sitting and listening to you talk, and I was like, I can picture Dave coming on and going, yeah, so sorry I wasn't with you last time. Wally graduated high school.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Or Corey will say, gee, I had to take time off because I became a granddad.
Yeah.
The day will come. The day will come.
No doubt. No doubt.
Yeah.
We're only like 2% through the book.
And we won't even be to the third age yet in either of those instances.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
That's true.
Not complaining, mind you.
We haven't our original map, wasn't it something we were planning originally on something like 20 seasons, weren't we? But we're already adding here,
I know.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, between this and exploring Lord of the Rings, you're going to have quite the library of stuff, Corey.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. No, this is I remember when people used to say, like, aren't you going to at some point, it's been almost 10 years now, aren't you going to run out of things to say about Tolkien? I mean, like, he only wrote so much after all, right? And I'm like, there are ways around that problem.
Yeah.
I tell people, about, Exploring Lord of the Rings is a good example, but I think this happens here with the film too. It's like, I say, look, Corey's been teaching Tolkien, he's been talking, years and years and years. And he still learns new stuff, like the reenactment of Weathertop, for example. I mean, you said you had a whole new perspective on it completely different. And I know we have stuff like that happen here too. So see, I mean, Tolkien is the gift that never stops giving.
It's right.
That's right.
That's right. Absolutely. No, good stuff. Today this is episode 2 now of season 4. So we're going to be doing. So last session we did the season overview, and today we're doing more detailed season overview. So the primary theme of last discussion was the scope, essentially trying to figure out exactly what we're going to try to cover. And it was the people who have been threatening to revolt if we tried to just do one season in between the Rising of the Sun and the Battle of Sudden Flame, made their big pitch, and we sort of settled on splitting it up into 2 seasons, which I kind of like. The thing I like about it most, now I still hold to what I've been saying, that I think it could be done in 1 season. I do think it could be done in 1 season, but the thing that we gain by splitting into 2 seasons is being able to add more story, basically. There are a bunch of things that I would love to be able to get into more. And the number one thing that I'm excited to get into more is more stories of that, like, first generation of men when they arrive in Beleriand. Apart from the sort of really fairly briefly told story of Haleth and the death of her family, and then her leadership, her very strong leadership of her people. And Haleth, of course, is an awesome character. As I was saying at LA Mood, Haleth is like who Eowyn wanted to be when she grew up, right? I mean, Haleth is, the original awesome butt-kicking female character. However, apart from that one anecdote, we get almost nothing, really. of what happened to the men. We just get them shuffled around on the map, essentially. You know, we're kind of told where they end up and whom they end up allying themselves with, and then we kind of leave them behind until we get to the later generations. So being able to really kind of dig into the, you know, the character of Beor, the character of Haleth, really incorporating their stories more fully into the stories of Beleriand as we've established them, right? Not just having like, and so the people of Beor settled down here, and you know, these folks settled down up there, in Dorloman. Oh, by the way, so Dave, I don't think I told you one change that I suggested there, not super. So I'm bringing it up now because, of course, it's not going to be in this season as we're doing it. But I had suggested that I want to move Hodor Goldenhead back a couple generations, because one of the the three kindreds of men, right? Like they are like later on, you've got the people of Beor, right, and you've got the people of Haleth, and both of them were first generation, right? Beor came over, Haleth was like the first leader of her people, but the third, you know, the people of Malak, who become the people of Hodor Goldenhead down the road, like, but that's how they're known, right? They're known as the people of Hodor. Like Hodor is this sort of signature leader, you know, sort of house, the founder of the house that, you know, Hurin and Turin are eventually going to be from. But he's much later chronologically. I mean, he's like many generations later than Beor and Haleth. So my thought was to kind of simplify things, to have him be first generation, so that to have Hodor and Haleth and Beor be like the leaders of those three people in that first generation when they establish themselves, and so, which just means that we're basically pushing Hodor Goldenhead a few generations up the family tree from Hurin and Huor, which seemed to me fine. Like who's gonna miss that, right? So
nobody's gonna miss that. That's fine.
Oh, see, actually, now here we go.
We say that.
Yeah. Now, Marie has a wonderful suggestion. In fact, Marie's suggestion, that's exactly, Marie, how Tolkien would make this change. She says, what we should do is have an original Hodor, and then have Hodor Goldenhead, the grandfather of Hurin, be named after him. Ah, see, now that's it. That's of course exactly how we ended up with two Thrors and two Thrains in the lineage of Thorin, like how you ended up with Thrain the Old, because Tolkien made a mistake and just like multiplied Thrains to explain it. So yeah, absolutely. Okay, sure. I'm fine with that. I love it. I'm fine with that.
Very Tolkien-esque.
That's very Tolkien-esque. But anyway, so that way we have the House of Hodor, and because I honestly, like for many years, I was reading the Silmarillion, and I'm like, why do they call them the House of Hodor? Why aren't they called the House of Marach? Because Marach was the guy who like was their leader. Anyway, so we can avoid all of those problems. But anyway. Whatever. Point is, we'll get to dig into those stories a lot more, and I think that's great. I'm really looking forward to that. And of course, secondarily, I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to get into the dwarf stories a bit. And we did some kind of teasing, or at least we did some preliminary discussion, excuse me, of the petty dwarf situation, right? And the possibility of having, the prospect, that is, of having meme come at the end of a story that is actually told, rather than one that is only quite vaguely gestured to, which is what we get in the published Silmarillion, I think is really neat. So I'd really like to do that too. So, I agree, if we want to add all of those kinds of things, plus of course we still want to maintain our view of what's going on among the bad guys, and to keep in touch with our primary background, sort of anti-protagonist, Sauron, in his trek through the ages here. We don't want to lose track of Sauron this season either, so we're going to need to add some material to keep in touch with him and see what he's up to during this whole time. So, and there's some new characters we're going to need to be working on and stuff like that. So anyway, that's all of this stuff is reason enough for me to reconcile myself to the shift to 2 seasons, which is good. It's good that I was reconciled to that because the entire the PowerPoint slides that were made up for us are entirely presume that we're in fact going ahead with that. So.
Yeah, it's good that you're reconciled because you were going to be reconciled. Because it's good that you're reconciled psychologically because you had no choice.
Yeah, exactly, and that's fine. You know, the will of the people. I'm willing to submit to that most of the time.
I wasn't particularly invested in the original schedule. As far as I can tell, this is just going to last forever anyway. Yeah, I think you're right.
For The Hobbit, could be what Peter Jackson went through.
Or a revolt of the people on the discussion boards? No,
a decision to, expand.
To expand, right, yeah.
Maybe Fran just handed him a three movie script outline. He was like, oh, I guess we're doing this.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. All I can say is if Peter Jackson had Marie handing him his plot outlines, things would have gone much better. But anyway, so let us move forward. One quick announcement I want to do before we get too deep into the details here of the new season 4 outline. Magnolia Moot is coming up soon in just over a week. So a week from today, I will be traveling again, and I will be headed down to Charlotte, North Carolina for Magnolia Moot, which is going to be a lot of fun. So if you're anywhere in the down there in the South and can drive to Charlotte for the day, you should totally join us because it's going to be awesome. So go to signumuniversity.org and you will see, if you scroll down just a little bit, the Magnolia Moot link where you can register and come and join us. And it's still even possible, if you want to give a paper, you can still submit proposals through today. They close today, November 2nd. It is November 2nd. That's right. Today is November 2nd, and it's the day that they close. So you are welcome to do that. And Marie, I believe you're right that I have forgotten to share my screen. Hang on. So the people on Twitch are seeing my slides, which is the first slide that I've shown, but the people on GoToWebinar are not. There you are. Okay. Excellent. Thank you, Marie, for reminding me of that. Okay, so that's the announcement. Don't forget, Magnolia Moot is coming up. We had an awesome time at LA Moot last week. We had a great film session. In fact, unbeknownst to me at the time, our film discussion that Dave and I had was recorded, and we're going to post that actually on our website. Now, this is not. There was very little that we said that was is going to be news to those of you who have been following along all the way through. But it will be especially useful, I think, for folks who are kind of interested in jumping in but haven't listened through or watched the entire first 3 seasons leading up to it. We ended up doing a pretty good overview and discussion of sort of what the overall goals of the project are and what we're working on. So I thought that was pretty cool, and we're gonna post that. I think we're gonna link to it on the main film page on the Mythgard website. So it's probably where that's going to end up living. So
that'll be fun.
Yeah.
There's a couple interesting discussions and insights in there.
Yeah, definitely. Phil, we might add it to the podcast feed as well. That might happen. Yeah. I'll see how it ends up being sort of packaged. Again, it wasn't really done with that kind of publication in mind, but maybe we'll see. We'll see what we can make of it. Yeah. All right. Cool. So let's get started. So today, as I say, we're going to be thinking through things more in detail. And there are a couple different ways that we can look at this. One is looking at this kind of episode. I want to do more mapping out episode by episode to make a plan so that we can have things laid out for us as we go through to discuss the season episode by episode. But of course, in doing that, there are also several different plot lines that we need to think about how we're going to develop. Because I personally, my sense of this, in the thinking that I've been doing about this, I think the plot outline is going to be kind of complicated. I sort of suspect that a bunch of these episodes we're going to be kind of developing as we go along, because there's... Well, and this is both kind of a fun complication of season 4, but I also suspect a challenge of season 4. Season 4 is going to be, there's going to be a lot of talking that goes on in season 4, right? It's going to be a lot of sort of politics, fewer big events, fewer battles. And, so we've had things like the departure from Valinor, the kinslaying, the battle, with the green elves and the dwarves and the orcs, and the Sindar, and the burning of the ships. There's been like major things, so we could make an outline that said like, okay, these major things are happening, and then obviously we have to be working forward the other, the different threads that we have, as we sort of go along. The simple list of major events that occur in this season seem to me to be significantly fewer. So I think that's going to be interesting. And my suspicion is that our episode outline is going to be a little bit more fluid than it often has been.
Right, because we can't organize it around like, this is the episode with this battle.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, Instead what we're going to have is several threads that are going to be going on over multiple episodes, and I think we may end up kind of changing our minds about how we want to pace that and how we want that to develop, at least during like particular segments of this season. So we'll see. But first we need to talk about overarching themes. Obviously, we've I think done a pretty good job in thinking through. Each season so far has been interested in a couple fairly major themes, and so these are the sort of suggestions or thoughts about themes for this time. The good guys have to learn that they are stronger together. But unlike season 1, which was, of course, also very interested in cooperative action, but in season 1, the themes focused on creative collaboration and unity and diversity, and now we're dealing with issues of forgiveness and working past grievances. Yeah, that's a really big deal. Forgiveness is going to be, I think, a really interesting sub-theme of this season. Forgiveness and the lack of forgiveness. And there's... I wonder. See, I'm tempted to say I could even see that itself, like the issue of forgiveness itself. Because, I mean, yes, working together and, like, we need to cooperate in order to, to be able to defeat Morgoth, to be able to hold Morgoth in leaguer is... clearly going to be an element, but I'm tempted to take forgiveness itself as the central and primary theme. And I wonder how well that will work. I wonder if, and when I say how well that will work, what I'm wondering is what kind of resolution can we bring that to? What does it lead to? How is that theme resolved over the course of this episode? It's not like we like totally finish themes earlier on, but if we're sort of asking a question persistently, we need to have at least, maybe more than one, but we need to have some to be working up towards answers to that. And I can see how forgiveness works as a theme, especially at the beginning of the season, right? I mean, we start obviously with the issue with the tension among the Noldor, right? We ended season 3 on both a literal and figurative cliffhanger, right? Literal in Maedhros' case, figurative in the situation of not really knowing if the army of Fingolfin is going to be marching on the army of Feanor, right? And the Feanorians. And whether open battle was going to result between the two of them. So we start with that really tense situation and the great need for forgiveness there. between those two. But then, of course, we have the whole kinslaying thing, and that's a major plot in this season. That is the Sindar and Thingol eventually finding out the truth about the kinslaying, and now we have this schism opening up between the Sindar and the Noldor, and there's need for forgiveness there too, or they're going to be split and they're going to be divided. Where do we sort of lead up to? What is some of the final things that are going to be happening in this season are like the move into Gondolin and the establishment of Nargothrond. That certainly hardly would at least explicitly seem to serve as any kind of conclusion to this particular theme. David Atlee makes a really interesting point that he says Elvish memory seems particularly poorly suited to forgiveness. The pain will remain perpetually fresh, and we can see that in the ban of the Noldor from Menegroth. Yes, David, I agree with that. Now, at the same time, of course, like forgetting and forgiving aren't the same, right? And elves, so there's no question of like, it's just healing. And David, I do think that one of the things that we can emphasize is because of the nature of elvish memory, as you're saying, I think it would be fun to really use this as an opportunity to explore, as we've done in other ways, the fundamental differences between elvish psychology and human psychology, right? Pain diminishes over time for humans, right? It's how we are in general. To show that being less the case with elves, and because of the nature of how they experience the world, having them have a different challenge, because again, it's not like forgiving and forgetting are the same, right? They're not the same. You can forgive without forgetting. It's not a prerequisite, right? But yet, if you're the clearer and more present the memory of the wrong is, the harder it's going to be to forgive. So, yeah. No, Tony, I agree. The founding of Nargothrond and Gondolin can be the way that my initial thought, Tony, there is that we can see the founding of Nargothrond and Gondolin both as kind of two different models for what sort of starting afresh looks like, right? These are sort of the new kingdoms. These are the great kingdoms that, it almost says you should do this, right? And so they have this vision of these new realms. And Turgon creates, of course, there are, Tony, as you point out, both Sindar and Noldor commingled in greater numbers than anywhere else, we're told, in Nevrast, who then moved to Gondolin. So the Gondolindrim are a greater and more successful kind of Sindar-Noldor melting pot than anywhere else. But then when we think about that in conjunction with the isolationism of Gondolin, and I think in particular of the way in which Turgon seems to be, in a sense, more kind of backward looking, that is backward looking to Valinor. I'm thinking of his, like, the tree of silver and gold, right, that he makes, and the little, like, Gondolin as sort of scale model of Tirion upon Tuna, right, on its little hill in, of Tumladen there. My thought is that Turgon's model for healing, right, for healing the hurts of the elves and the divisions among the elves, is to be like, let us retreat to our little elvish utopia, right, and let's recreate, let's recapture together, let's forget things. Maybe he's more about sort of forgetting like what has been happening, I don't know, but let's go back and let's like recapture Valinor, right? Let's build our little mini, like, this is Valinor East, right? And we're going to separate ourselves from everything, and we're going to be out of, and so like we will cut ourselves off from any evil influence that could come to mar there will be no second darkening, right? Metaphorical darkening. They don't have literal light, obviously, from their trees, but no evil shall come to sully our perfect little valley paradise again. This is what moving forward looks like. Moving forward is moving back, right? We're reestablishing our little mini Valinor, and we're going to live there, and that's what it's going to be like, right? That's sort of Turgon's vision of what healing the wounds of the elves sort of looks like, right? He can't do it for everybody. No, lots of other people aren't cooperating, but he can, they can do this, right? And Finrod would have a different vision, and one of the things, Finrod's vision is more cosmopolitan in a sense, in that like Turgon's is a little elvish paradise, right? He's got the Sindar and the Noldor working together and everything. Finrod establishes relationships with the dwarves, right? I mean the Nauglamir, right? And we have him, and Nargothrond was a dwarvish place, so we have to have Finrod interacting with the dwarves. It's not going to work if he doesn't, right? So having him work, and we also know that although it's not going to happen now in this season, he's going to be the one who meets the men and brings them in, right? He's the force behind the integration of men into Elvish society. So this idea of Finrod's vision being more like let us bring together all the free peoples, not just the elves. So he's less focused on let's bring together the Noldor and the Sindar and make it work together. He's kind of thinking bigger, right? So we could do that as Turgon being enclosed, right? Turgon being like, let's shut out everything else and let's just focus on living the perfect life here. And Finrod being focused on reaching outward, right? His center of power is still secret. I mean we still have to do that. It's not like he's setting himself as the center of like an open empire or something like that. But he's focused on reaching out to these other kingdoms, whereas Turgon is focused on shutting in. I think that would be a sort of a sensible way to do this. And both of them could see themselves as, in this sense, sort of forces of reconciliation, right? We could even do Turgon. Turgon is a voice of reconciliation who feels like he's being ignored, right? Like he can't get any traction with everybody else. Like every Thingol is, being a pain. The Feanorians are beyond a pain. Even his own siblings are like not really wholehearted. They're not willing to go out. And so he's like, okay, you know what? We're going to do it ourselves, right? We're going to, David, that's a really good way to think about it. David Atlee says that the Gondolindrim are kind of like elvish monks, cutting themselves off from the world in order to study the greatest goods of the elvish life. Yes, building a little separate community that is designed to be separated from the world, but also in a sense not out of touch with the world, in a sense being to create to make a society, right, which is like how things should be, how things are supposed to be. Exactly, Tony. So the people of Nargothrond would be more like friars. Yeah. I don't know that I want to go too far with that parallel, but yeah, something like that. Engaging the world more actively, yes. And then, David, I mean, I think inescapably we're going to have to examine the morality of isolationism, and it's going to become, I think, more and more questionable. This is going to be tricky, right? Because, of course, one of the other characters that we have here, in one sense, one of the obvious kind of opposite poles from Turgon in the founding of Gondolin is Eol. Right. And of course, especially with, the Miglin connection between them, how Eol and Turgon are kind of, antagonistic in a sense. But of course, they're also parallel in a sense. Right. Both of them are isolationist. So having Eol there as like the dark foil of Turgon, I think is going to be kind of cautionary from the beginning. Right. And I think that we can do some kind of interesting things with that, really. I wouldn't want to make Gondolin look simply shady from the beginning, right? I think if we have to be careful to make sure that Turgon and the Gondolindrim don't just look like snobs or something. Like, well, we're gonna go off and be elitist and live in a commune and have the perfect society and ignore all of you losers, right? They could look like that, but I don't want them to look like that. What they're building is great. They're building one of the greatest things of the First Age, and it is, as somebody was saying, but I've lost it already. It's the hope of the elves, right? I mean, it's going to be one of the great. David Atlee was saying that. Yes, it is. On the one hand, it's the great elvish hope, right? There is a sense in which Turgon is living the dream. Like, he accomplishes what most of the other elves try to accomplish and fail at, and Gondolin will become like this emblem, right, of successful resistance, essentially, against Morgoth as things get darker and darker. So I want to make sure that Gondolin is great, right? That Gondolin is really ideal, actually. But from the beginning, I think there need to be some kind of questions. There needs to be a sense of cost, right, to cutting themselves off, and of danger to cutting themselves off. And as we get further on in the story of Gondolin, we see that cost coming due, right? Both in the Arthel situation and in the Maegwyn situation, but also in Turgon's own choices, right? Culminating in Turgon's decision to not obey Ulmo's command, right? When Ulmo's message is brought in by Tuor and his refusal to leave, right? That is the fall of Turgon, and it needs to not come out of nowhere. It shouldn't come out of nowhere. It won't be coming out of nowhere because that danger has been there all the way through. So it's kind of a delicate thing, I think, that we need to do with Gondolin there. But exactly, Chris. The isolationism looking more and more questionable as time goes on. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, thinking about forgiveness. If this season, if we think about the end goal of this season, that is just plot wise, right? Where we're building to. The reason I'm focusing here on Gondolin and Nargothrond so much in thinking about this overview right now is that our projected new season, this is where it's going to. This is this is where we're likely to want the focus to end up. I mean, we're thinking of having an action sequence at the very end in the final episode. We had talked about having this season 4 end in that episode when Glaurung escapes, right? So we have the first attack of Glaurung, which foreshadows the attack of the Battle of Sudden Flame. So we have the sort of warning shot of the Battle of Sudden Flame happening at the end, and that's the end of this season. But in a sense, that's not really the culmination of this, of course. It seems to me that the real, in a sense, the real sort of thematic finale of what we're building up this season is Gondolin and Nargothrond. So yeah, having them be the two. There's lots of strife and difficulty everywhere else, right? And we'll see a lot of failure. And that's maybe one of the ways in which we can kind of think about it thematically. Again, I keep coming back to this the concept of forgiveness, which seems so central to what's happening. The need for it is so obvious in all of our major plot lines. It really fits with almost everything, with the obviously the Noldor plot lines, the Sindar plot lines, the dwarf plot lines. It works really for all of those things. And if we think about building towards, at the end of the season, what we will have will be a bunch of different models, right? Several different models for what unforgiveness looks like. Like, here's one example of what the failure to forgive brings. Eöl is one example, perhaps the most extreme example of the failure of forgiveness, right? Thingol will be another example of the failure of forgiveness. Caranthir will be another example of the failure of forgiveness. And then we have a few examples of at least partial success of forgiveness, right? Fingon, right? And Maedhros even to some extent. And then we have obviously Gondolin and Nargothrond being the two best examples, but still possibly, sort of flawed or kind of troubling in different ways. Now, Tony, I agree that the themes of the concepts of forgiveness and of reconciliation are not exactly the same. And that's actually one of the things that I would be really interested to explore. And it seems to me that I would want to build on, because of course, like, I would say forgiveness is much deeper than reconciliation. You can be reconciled to somebody and there still not be forgiveness, right? And that's what I would like to play. The first initial push in the beginning of the season has got to just be towards reconciliation, right? Like, hey, everybody, let's not fight with each other, right? That's step one, is not fighting. Let's not have the Noldor dissolve into combat and have the Feanorians and the people of Fingolfin fighting it out, right? Let's not do that. Okay, all right, we succeed in not doing that. Hey, let's not have reprisals between the Sindar and the Noldor, right? Okay, can we not? So the feast that we get, right, in which I think we're planning in episode 5, as we'll see, that reconciliation happens, right? This is the Feast of Reconciliation. We're good. Everyone's like, hooray, peace in Beleriand, and we're all going to work together. But that doesn't mean that forgiveness has really happened, right? And I think that what I would like to then show in the second half of the season is we need to do more than just agree not to fight. We need to do more than that. So long as there is a lack of forgiveness, unless we are really willing to forgive each other and move past the bad things that have happened in the past, then we're like the reconciliation. There's still going to be too many cracks that can open up again, and so what we need to be showing, of course, is the bad guys exploiting the cracks that remain when you have reconciliation without forgiveness. So yeah. Now, Karita, I agree. You can also forgive someone and not be reconciled to them. Absolutely. Yeah. As Karita points out, forgiving someone who is not a safe person is still worth doing, but you don't let them, house sit or babysit for you. Yeah, no, agreed. And I think that we can I think it would be interesting to show that in some cases too. Yeah. Here's one of the positive things. We have lots of characters, right? We have a large cast of characters in this season, which means we have the potential to illustrate lots of different perspectives, right? So Karita, we can absolutely have that. I think it would be really fun to have a character, a Sindar perspective character, who is willing to forgive, but still very cautious against working together. I would nominate Melian for this. She urges forgiveness. I'm thinking Thingol's decree against the Noldor is our first example of Thingol not listening to his wife, which will become a trend, right? I'm thinking she would urge forgiveness. Now, Hakon, Círdan is another. Círdan is my second choice. Círdan is my second choice. He, being outside Doriath, is going to be probably working with the Noldor more directly. And I would think that Círdan, Círdan actually collaborating with the Noldor, Marie, exactly. So maybe what we end up getting there, again, are sort of three different perspectives, right? Thingol Thingol does neither, right? He won't reconcile with them and he won't forgive them. Melian urges forgiveness, but she still keeps the girdle up, right? She still is fine with not allowing them in. She's not keen to mingle with them or have them come into Doriath and mingle with them. Again, that's Thingol's decree, but I think she might support that, but urge. So when I say we get an example of him not listening to his wife, it would be early stages of that, right? So she and he agree on no, let's, we're fine. Having Feanorians here seems like a bad idea. In fact, maybe even she has a foretelling, right? A premonition that Feanorians coming to Doriath will be bad, right? We don't want Feanorians in Doriath. But anyway, but where Thingol doesn't listen to his wife is not in actions. He's not taking actions that she doesn't approve, or that she counsels him actively against, but she is trying to urge him that it is important to forgive. He needs to get past this. He can't just go on carrying a grudge for what happened. But he does, right? But Círdan, yes, being the one who both forgives and reconciles with the Noldor would work for me. Melian's forgiveness of the Noldor can be sort of demonstrated by Galadriel's coming and living there. We'll get to Galadriel, much more on Galadriel later. She needs to be a pretty important figure in this season in some ways. And yeah, Oakwig, Cyros isn't a good candidate. No. Yeah, Cyros is a bad example, right? He neither forgives nor reconciles. In fact, Cyros can really be an active spokesperson for the bad attitude that Thingol has, right? Certainly, at the very least, not that we want to show Cyros as if he's controlling or manipulating Thingol, but he should definitely be a very strong yes man to Thingol when Thingol is acting and speaking rashly towards the Noldor. I would think that Cyros would be all about that. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think this is, I think this works. The more I think about it, the more I like it. And in the end, it's going to be a bit of a failure. That is, we're not going to see forgiveness. We're going to see comparatively few examples of real forgiveness and of real repentance, right? Because, of course, that's the other side, is that you need to be penitent. You need to really repent of what you did in seeking forgiveness, right? So Caranthir, I was speaking of Caranthir before, and I was being a little bit sloppy in my terminology there. Caranthir, of course, doesn't really have anything to forgive, but his attitude shows his lack of penitence, right? He's not sorry for what they did. And I agree, Marie, the Feanorians in general aren't penitent. With the possible, I think that we need to show Maedhros and Maglor as being more penitent than the rest, right? But certainly, and Amras should be the most penitent. Yeah? Yeah, Hakan says, some like Maedhros and Amras don't forgive themselves. Yes. Which is, of course, another important element of this whole equation, right? Yes, if we show Amras as haunted by the past, right? I wanted him sort of breaking with Feanor, right? And being the first to see the destructiveness of the oath and the direction that his father has taken them. But that doesn't mean, I could see it going a couple different ways, right? Amras could either be the most penitent, the only truly penitent of the Feanorians, or he could be the example of, Hakan, as you suggest, sort of self-loathing, not forgiving himself, right? Most bitter. But of course, this puts him straight back down the suicidal path that you guys keep wanting me not to put him down, right? Yeah, the voice of judgment. Yeah, judgment of the others, right? Yeah, he could be the one who is always rising up and condemning everybody else. But you got to think that, like, Caranthir and Celegorm aren't going to put up for that, or Curufin are going to put up with that for very long, right? I mean, I'm not saying they're going to have him killed, but I mean, especially since he's the youngest brother at this point, would they just boot him? I mean, like, at some point they're going to stop inviting him to the family barbecues, right? I'm just trying to think of how he would fit. Could he become isolated? Could he, in fact, become... We could make him into a sort of a... make him into a sort of a hermit-like figure, right? In fact, we could make him a kind of a third... Yeah, Nick, exactly. Nick is thinking about Eol here. Eol, Turgon, and Emras as three who are seeking isolation in different ways and for different reasons, right? But all of them kind of exploring both the positives and the negatives. Yeah. It kind of seems to be... It's hard for me to see with the trajectory that we have, given the character trajectory we've given Amras, I can't imagine him not ending up on his own, right? I mean, the only thing that would make any sense is that he remains with Maedhros, because Maedhros is the only one who is... I could see him remaining with Maedhros and being like Maedhros' conscience, essentially, right? But Maedhros is not willing to make the final step, right? As we see, like, what is going to end up leading Maedhros to steal the Silmarils, right, at the very end, after the War of Wrath, is still that, like, he does not fully repent, right? He will not turn away from his from the oath like Amras is. Amras is all in. He's done. Right? Since the death of his brother and his condemnation of his father, he's done. He's still bound by the oath. He still swore it, right? And he's still kind of hosed, but he repents of it. He turns away from it. So, yeah. Yeah, I like that. He can still serve as, like, the conscience of the Feanorians, but he's the conscience of the Feanorians who gets consulted less and less by the Feanorians, right? Pretty quickly, Caranthir, Celegorm, and Curufin want nothing to do with him, right? Maglor can visit him most. Maedhros will still check on him, send folks to check on him and stuff. And we can have, I think, a kind of an interesting scene when Maedhros is going to recruit Amros to help him and to join with him again when it comes time for the League of, for the Alliance of Maedhros leading up to the Near Ninth Arnoediad. So he can be involved there. But there's not too much for him to do between now and then. So having him kind of living in isolation makes some sense to me.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the conscience of being the conscience of the Feanorians could get a little, that's definitely going to get a little tiresome after a while, because there's going to be centuries of him saying, hey guys, you really think we should be doing this? And them not listening.
Right. Yeah, it's a thankless job being the conscience of the Feanorians.
No kidding.
Yeah, but if he's not present with them, then
right, yeah,
it would be easier.
He can be the symbolic conscience of the Feanorians.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, it's really not there's really not actionable. No one actually listens to him.
Right.
But if somebody asks, do you guys have a conscience? They point at him and say,
yeah, he lives over there somewhere. I haven't seen him in centuries, but yeah, he's there. Yep, we totally do. That position is filled, right? Yes. Yeah. Okay.
That's his job. We don't have to worry about having.
Exactly.
We don't have any of our,
right.
He just does it.
That liberates the rest of us.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. When would we want him? Well, we'll have to see how the Feanorians develop over time. See, this is one example of, like, when does the separation of Amros come? I could see us doing it near the very beginning. I could see us doing it near the very end of the season, at almost any time in between. Like, I'm not really sure. We'll just kind of... This is one of the things that I mean when I say I feel like the season outline is a little more indefinite.
Yeah. I don't think we need to assign it to a particular there isn't like a clear sort of like, oh, it belongs in this episode at this point. I imagine we'll notice the moment when it arrives, like, oh, this is the perfect time.
This is the time. Yeah, exactly. I'm kind of hoping that we'll be inspired in exactly that kind of way.
Because we ought to give him a chance to, like, dissuade them from some bad behavior.
Yes. Yeah, he has to establish himself as the conscience of the Feanorians, right? Who is not listened to in general by the Feanorians.
Right. They can't ignore him if he doesn't say anything.
Right, exactly. Now, I agree, like, having him always around, always saying the same thing, and always being ignored will get tiresome very quickly. And even the viewers will just get irritated with him, and we don't want that. But yeah, we do need to have that dynamic establish itself and play itself out, and then we can separate him. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I think this works. Of course, the story. One of the neat things about thinking about forgiveness and reconciliation, right, is this gives us the opportunity to put a very appropriate and appealing spotlight on the relationship between Celeborn and Galadriel. And we'll come back to that. But of course, being the most prominent in the season, not the only, but the most prominent in the season of the Noldor-Sindar marriages that we get. In one sense, right, this season is going to be famous for its marriages. The primary being Galadriel and Celeborn's. And the fact that that's a Noldor-Sindar marriage and that in the context of, and in Doriath, right, where we've got a major forgiveness issue and where the kinslaying thing is the biggest scandal, the center of the kinslaying scandal, right, really makes their reconciliation and marriage together more significant in that way. Okay. All right. I think this works. So the villains then, sowing division and isolating their enemies. Yes, we'll talk a little bit more about what the villains do, but I think this is the season when Sauron is really going to come into his own, right? We've been looking at, in the last couple seasons, we've been looking at the conflict between Gothmog and Sauron, right? And essentially it's been one between force and guile, right? Force and cunning. Gothmog is the thug, and Sauron is the wily plotter. Here, Gothmog, it's not time for Gothmog, right? Gothmog's star is going to be declining in this season, and I think we have the obvious opportunity for that. The glorious battle of the Dagor Aglareb, that's going to be Gothmog, right? This whole the Dagor Aglareb is the sort of the next great attempt to wipe out the elves, and it's the one which proves to Morgoth, for once and for all, that orcs are not capable of destroying the elves. Like, no army of orcs, howsoever big, is going to be effective in destroying the Noldor. That's the conclusion that Morgoth is going to come to. And I'm thinking Gothmog is the entire moving force behind that battle. I'm thinking Sauron already sees it. I'm thinking Sauron is there saying, hey, let's not attack. This is stupid. Like, we know they're going to beat the orcs. Like, the orcs can't stand up to them. And Gothmog is like, nonsense. We shall pound and crush them. And Sauron's like, dude, let's not do this. And Gothmog is like, crush. So they attack and they lose hideously. Right? They get absolute...
Or Sauron supports Gothmog because he knows it's going to destroy Gothmog with Morgoth.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
That's even better. Yeah. Oh, Gothmog, I think that's a brilliant idea. Why don't you take all your orcs and go smash them?
Right.
Yeah.
Gothmog smash.
Gothmog smash. Exactly, Zach. Yeah. So Gothmog loses, and so this is and then Sauron is like, so plan B, right? Let's be cunning about this. And so Sauron then would be behind the stratagem to capture the elves, mess them up, and release them as spies, right? Because this whole situation of like, hey, there's lots of tensions and distrust among the elves. Let's expand and exploit that, right? That's Sauron all over. And I think that we can show both Sauron and Thurin-Gwethil being very directly involved in this kind of thing. Yeah. No, David, Sauron wouldn't be able to advocate it openly. He would be advocating it secretly. I would think he would be egging Gothmog on, or maybe using some, maybe, I don't know how sort of sly and cunning we want to make him, like if he's using reverse psychology in private on Gothmog and getting but he would manipulate Gothmog into doing the wrong thing, so that with the intention of him looking good by contrast, which he would definitely do. Hakan says we need some kind of build up to the Dagor Aglareb to make the victory some kind of surprise. Hakan, here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking we can... Maybe Sauron knows it's not going to work. Or Sauron really suspects it's not going to work. And we know Sauron suspects it's not going to work. But the elves think it will, right? So we can have some of the elves be like... The good guys are worried that because this will be the first time that they have really confronted a full battle. Like they can be thinking like, look, okay, the forces that we, the Feanorians, defeated at the very beginning, that was only a small portion of the Sauron's or of Morgoth's creatures, right? It's going to be way, way, way worse than that. And we're all divided in this. So there can be a lot of hand wringing among the good guys, right? Especially like, come on, people, we have to get together as long as we're divided. And you've got Fingolfin up there in the north, right? Fingolfin being like, oh man, like, well, are the Feanorians even going to help? And now the Sindar are completely useless. And what on earth is going on here? How are we we're going to get swept away. They're going to come out here and they're going to be Balrogs and it's going to be terrible, right? And then they win, and they win handily. Right. And so it can be a surprise. Like the good guys can be surprised and very pleased at the results. Maria's reminding us of the Feanorians, like Maedhros' capture, right, and how the Feanorians who were with Maedhros were thoroughly defeated, and so maybe he remember we unveiled trolls at that point, right? We had the reveal of trolls as kind of the next stage in the research and development, right, by Morgoth. So we had the troll guard of Sauron taking captive Maedhros and destroying a lot of the Feanorians. So, I mean, I'm thinking their fears are based on what they don't know, right? First of all, like, okay, those trolls, like, that was bad, and who knows how many of them there are going to be. Maybe we're going to face thousands and thousands of trolls. Maybe that was just the first step. Maybe there's going to be something else. Like, we didn't expect the trolls. Like, we beat the orcs pretty well, and we didn't expect the trolls, and maybe there's going to be something else. And of course, there is going to be something else, right? The dragons, but they don't know it yet, and they're not going to see it yet. So I do think that in the end, they are going to be fearing that the enemy is going to be stronger than he is. And then they're going to be surprised, and it's going to build some false confidence in everybody, which is going to have different effects on different people, right? Some are going to be really cocky as a result. For some, it will be a sign of, like, this is what unity can bring. And so we can have some both positive and negative outcomes to that. But I don't think it will be difficult for us to have folks like rightly nervous about what Morgoth has up his sleeve there. Nick is wondering if it would give the elves the impression that orcs will be stronger than last time. Possibly. Yeah, I mean, this idea of, we could even have, let's see, who would be we know that Morgoth is going to be like dispersing his power among his creatures, right? Maybe some of the Noldor, maybe somebody among the Noldor knows about this or speculates about this. Who would be like the philosopher / theologian of them? Turgon? Who is it who would be able to kind of theorize about this and explain, like, okay, Morgoth has been here. He's going to be Finrod, Tony suggests. Finrod is the philosopher. Yeah, no, Marie's right about that too. Okay. Finrod. Fine.
That seems appropriate.
Yeah.
Turgon, I think, is a reasonable alternative. But yeah, Finrod really is the philosopher, isn't he?
Yeah. So if Finrod explains how this works, right? If Finrod can explain to everybody, and therefore conveniently the viewers as well, that
good old exposition.
Yeah, just a little bit of exposition there. Never hurt anybody, and that Morgoth can disperse his power, and that therefore we have every reason to believe that not only are like greater and greater evils going to come upon us, but like the creatures that we've already seen are likely to become greater and more powerful as time goes on. Well, Nick, no, I don't think Finrod is wrong. Here's what I'm thinking, Nick. I said there are going to be a bunch of different reactions to the Dagor Aglareb, right? here's one reaction I think should happen. I think that there should be some among the elves who are saying, okay, that was too easy. That was like suspiciously easy. There's something else going on here, right? So that's what I'm thinking. And I'm thinking maybe Finrod is one of those who says, okay, we won. I do not think that this is an indication of what's to come. I still stand by my theories that there is worse coming. And of course, there is, right? Glaurung the dragon is going to be an illustration of this. And by the way, I think maybe we should actually think about having the orcs increase in strength over the course of time. Like, because Morgoth is, in fact, investing them with more and more of his power. So I think we might want to leave room. We had our first orc invasion, right, under Bulldog back in season 3. And I think if we might want to leave ourselves room to have the orcs become, like, larger and fiercer. At the very least, we can show them be more and more effectively armored and armed as the seasons go on, so that, by the time we, like, the orcs who are fighting, Denethor, and the Ents there and what's his name, Maglor. We got those orcs fighting them, and then by the time we get up to the orcs in the Battle of Sudden Flame, the orcs are like, they've upgraded, right? They're increased. By the time we get to the orcs that are fighting Turin, right? So by the time we get to the Near Knife, things are different. And then Nick, by the time we get to the War of Wrath, they're not quite Warhammer orc in strength and power, but they can be they can be greater. I mean, remember, the War of Wrath is not going to be a cakewalk for the good guys, right? So yes, showing them. Marie says Angband should have cutting edge military technology at all times. Agreed. Yeah. I think that we can. We can kind of do that, but still they're not, so again, Finrod isn't wrong in saying this, and we can show that, and we can even have, people notice this, right? But it's still too early. It's not there yet. And we know this to be a mistake, essentially, that this is Gothmog's blunder. But of course, we also know that it's Gothmog's blunder that Sauron has sort of lured him into, right? And, but the good guys don't know this. They don't know about the divisions among their enemies and what's going on there. So some of them think it's just a sign of the enemy's weakness and their own strength. So some of them are like, this is going to be easier than I thought, right? And others are thinking, like, this is a trick, right? That we're being lulled into complacency deliberately by the enemy. That was way too easy and should not have happened like that. And since it did, like, we need to suspect it. So that will be one reaction that people will have. And I would think that Finrod would be among those who would say that. And probably Turgon would agree with him. Because, again, they're fording up, right? So they are expecting that things are going to get worse than they are. They've been warned about that, right, by Ulmo. So they definitely need to do that. And Tony, you're right. Finrod needs to remind everyone that Morgoth is the mightiest of all the dwellers in Ea. Yeah, let's not forget who we're dealing with, people. Right? This guy's kind of a big deal. Okay, all right, good. So, okay, I know I spent a lot of time on this slide, but it's not an indication of how much time we're going to spend on every slide. Wanted to think about sure. Yeah, no, it's all good. I wanted to think about the big picture here, because that's super important, I think. All right, so let's go down to nitty gritty. So, suggestions for episode 1. Okay, so these are suggestions. So Maria's put these together. Many of them her suggestions. Some of them drawn from other suggestions on the discussion boards as well. So begin with a slight time skip from the season finale. The Noldor are already established on opposite sides of Lake Mithrim, which with much tension between them. The primary storyline should be meeting Círdan. The tension of the opposing Noldor camps is the backdrop for that. Fingolfin reforges Ringil. Fingon rescues Maedhros. Yeah, agreed. That's a lot to happen in one episode, I think. The one thing I'm most uncertain about is Círdan. That is, okay. I definitely want Fingon to rescue Maedhros in episode 1. That seems to me like the real center of that episode. If we can bring in Círdan and Celeborn, right? Celeborn was with Círdan when last we saw them. If we bring in Círdan and Celeborn in this episode, I'm not sure that we'll be able to do justice to all of those things. And if we have to ditch one, I'm ditching Círdan and bringing him in later rather than bringing him in this episode. I don't want to shortchange Fingon and Maedhros. That's the really big deal. And the reforging of Ringil is kind of cool. I do want to maintain the forging of swords is like an interesting little running motif in this season, actually, right? We're going to have the forging of Ringil. We're going to have the forging of morally questionable swords by Eöl. We're going to have the forging of Narsil happen in this season as well. We need to have the forging of Aron Ruth as well. I think we can make a kind of a big deal of that. Thingol's sword. Like, where does it come from? Who makes it and when? Like, I don't know, but we need to figure that out, right? So yeah, we've got a bunch of important swords that are made during the course of this season.
Apart from just the general fun and coolness of having all these epic weapons forged, the running motif of weapon forging is kind of an interesting contrast to the other overarching theme of forgiveness and working together.
Yes, potentially it is. Though, of course, the cool thing about starting off with Ringil here, remember that the reforging of Ringil is, in its way, it is a sign of reconciliation. Remember that Fingolfin breaks his sword after the kinslaying, right? This is like his sign of his own penitence for the kinslaying, right? And so he's all upset, and so we've got tension already between him and the Feanorians, and because he's penitent and they're not, right? And they decide to leave them, and so they're going to decide to leave him behind and everything. But the breaking of his sword is a really important sort of symbolic moment, both of his penitence for what he's done, but also of his kind of breaking with, like, you Feanor are fine with what you've done, right? You continue to embrace this path. I am leaving this path. I am not I'm following you, but I'm not following you anymore, right? That's kind of the moment for Fingolfin when he breaks his sword. And so the reforging of his sword, having the reforging of his sword coinciding with the reconciliation of the two factions of the Noldor at the rescue of Maedhros, seems to me to fit pretty well, right?
That's true. Good point.
So, but it is nevertheless, but Dave, I agree with you. The kind of tension there works really well, right? Yes, on the one hand, this is a reconciliation, right? But to say, like, I am this weapon, this instrument of death. Because remember, swords were the big deal in season 2, right? The forging of swords was a major moral turning point for the Noldor. Because it was like, the first of the things that we hear about them making, whose like the only function of a sword is killing folks, right? There's like nothing else you can do with a sword, apart from fighting. So it's still, there are still those moral questions to it, right? So they're like, hey, let's reconcile, let's all work together, and let's all get together to swear vengeance on our enemies is like questionable, right? And can certainly give us pause there. and suggest that there's perhaps some. And of course, we know the destiny of Ringil, right? Like, what is the culmination of the plot line that begins at the reforging of Ringil? The duel with Morgoth, right? So Fingolfin's ultimate destiny, his throwing away his life in battle, is, that makes all kinds of sense, right? Again, Dave, thinking of what you're suggesting about the sort of, sketchiness of his, or the moral questions that would attend this reforging, right?
Yeah.
Are borne out. Because although Fingolfin's death is awesome and valiant, it's ultimately
sort of pointless.
Yeah. He's ultimately,
we don't really want to say it that. I guess we don't want to say it that way, but it's it doesn't appear to accomplish anything tactically.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of the things that he dies a good death and a valiant death, and it's wonderfully heroic, but ultimately it is not entirely unrelated to suicide, right?
Yep.
Like the difference between Fingolfin's death and, think about the difference between like Fingolfin and Glorfindel's deaths, right? Or Ecthelion's. Glorfindel dies for a purpose. He accomplishes something with his death. He sacrifices his life so that others might live. Fingolfin doesn't do that, right?
Yep.
So yeah, it's his challenge of Morgoth is stirring and wonderful and epic and heroic and mad as well. Yeah. So, and that's going to be a very delicate dance that we have to dance when we get there, but that is not quite yet. But anyway, Dave, that is to say, with Ringil, we've got lots there. Okay, but hang on. So we don't have to actually discuss every episode in intimate detail here. But thinking about the connection between Círdan and the Noldor, I'm not quite sure about this. So here's the overview here. Okay, so First Contact, introducing the conflicts for the season, the Sindar Noldor and Intra Noldor. That is the advantage of bringing the Sindar in, like this bringing Círdan in the first episode. But again, I could see bumping that to episode 2. Have the first episode focus on the Intra Noldor conflicts reconciled through Fingon, though not perfectly, through Fingon's rescue of Maedhros. And then have episode 2 be the one where we have the emphasis on diplomatic connections in various ways. Both Angrod going to Thingol, Caranthir being himself, and then maybe we begin that with Círdan's First Contact, and he brings Angrod back with him, maybe, right? I'm still not kind of completely sure about that, but yeah. So then, all right, Maedhros ceding his claim as High King and Fingolfin crowned as High King. Yes, that's not a lot for an episode, but there's plenty more to do. See, this is, again, I think, I feel like this episode overview reflects what I was talking about before, right? Like, there are fewer kind of episode-filling events, I think. As again, look, episode 4, and Galadriel becomes Million's pupil, and Doriath and Eol hates his neighbors. Yes. Again, neither of those things exactly events. I think I really do think this is going to be more about thinking about overarching storylines and figuring out at what pace we want to develop them and how we want them to kind of overlay each other, than having sort of particular events that each episode focuses on. So then this would get us to Merith Adorthad, that is the Feast of Reconciliation, by episode 5. Which is fine. I think that's good. Okay. Episode 6, then, we have the So next comes the rumors, the truth of the rebellion of the Noldor coming out in bits and pieces, and this, of course, this would be strongly assisted by Sauron, who, let's not forget, has to first learn it. Right, the bad guys don't know what happened, so we have to have one of the plot lines be Sauron, through the help of his minions, right, with a little help from Thuringwethil and probably Tevildo. Remember, Tevildo is his torturer. So Tevildo and Thuringwethil would help him to uncover the truth about what happened, which means he's got to take some Noldor prisoners, right? So here's another thing. We already have enough characters. We don't need to add more characters. But we need people to be taken captive and released as spies. So like we need a selection of elves who can be captured and then who can either escape or be released, or like some of each, in order to be sowing discord among the rest of the elves, and also maybe Sauron himself going in disguise and that kind of thing. So that's fine. Who? I think we need named characters. I think we need to care about these characters, at least indirectly. That is to say, like, if we're not going to do this with any of the main characters, and I know that would be challenging in most cases. I mean, it's not like we can have, Fingon captured and tortured and released. They're most of the primary characters, like the grandsons of Finwë, are not going to really be candidates for this. But we have like wives and sisters. We have Celeborn, says Lincoln. Okay, Lincoln, I was so ready to dismiss that out of hand, and now I'm like, wait a second. That would be interesting. No, not Elmo, Hakon. Forget it. No Elmo. Yeah, Zach, no, I'm definitely thinking we can have somebody's wife. One of the things we were going to have, of course, one of the minor things we were going to do, Orodreth gets married to a Cinda woman. She could be one, right? She could be one. What about Orodreth himself? Yeah, and Karita, I'm not wanting to just harsh on the wives. Like, I don't want to just be like, and now, all the female characters are getting captured and tortured. I'm just thinking about, because again, it's going to be hard to repurpose the primary characters who we know are going to be actors all the way through, right? What about Orodreth? What about Orodreth himself? Okay, yeah, let's start here. Let's think of named characters who are candidates for capture. Marie suggests Angrod. Hakon suggests Ecthelion. Now, we have to imagine three different outcomes, right? Three different outcomes for the elves who are captured. Outcome number one is that they legitimately escape and are hardened by the experience, right? Another outcome is that they are dominated by the will of Sauron and Morgoth and become quislings, right? They become collaborators with the bad guys and spies, doing their will and sowing and contributing to sowing the seeds of discord. And there's a third middle ground where they just become scarred, like Gwyndor was, right? In the Turin story, where they're just shattered as a consequence of what happened, and they can still, in the end, kind of do Morgoth's will, but they're not active collaborators. So, Chris, that you're thinking exactly the lines that I was. Orodreth is such a limp fish in the published Silmarillion. I mean, he is a wuss. Just like constantly a wuss. He never does any. I mean, he's a complete cipher, right? So what if we make Orodreth? He'd be in like the Gwyndor category, right? And of course, Gwyndor is one of his people. And I'm not saying it's exactly the same, right? But Hakon, absolutely. If we're gonna do this with Ithilien, we have to show like this is how Ithilien became like, you know, the Elvish Rambo, right? Because he is now like Ithilien is now like the no holds barred warrior, right? As a consequence of his experience in Angband. Yeah. So, Chris, exactly. Orodreth would not be a collaborator, but it would make him damaged. It would make him timid. Yeah. 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 Well, no, Lincoln, there would be some would be Noldor. There has to be at least one Noldor, right? Because somehow Sauron and Morgoth have to actually learn about the kinslaying, right? So there has to be at least one Noldor who is taken. Tony suggests Cyros. I don't think Cyros could be taken because he doesn't fit any of the profiles. I mean, like, he's a fop, among other things, right? He's just like a snooty, conceited, stuck-up prig. And you don't get to be a stuck-up prig after that kind of experience, I don't think. Yeah. And you're right, Marie, he wouldn't leave Doriath either. So the only Doriath elves who would be candidates would be those who travel. And there's kind of few of them, right? Maglor and Beleg primarily, or Mablung and Beleg. I'm going to do that a lot, by the way. Mix up Mablung and Maglor's names. I do that all the time. My apologies. But anyway, Mablung and Beleg, and to some extent Celeborn, in as much as we want to send him off on missions too. David Atlee has an interesting idea. What about Caranthir?
Oh, I like it.
Yeah. The problem is, I mean, yeah, Hakon, you've got the oath. So, like, he wouldn't be an active collaborator, right? The idea wouldn't be that he now secretly serves Morgoth, and that's why he's such a jerk. That's too simple. And as you say, Hakon, it doesn't work with the oath. He would still believe he's doing his own thing. But it might help to explain why he's as hard as he is without just being like, well, Caranthir was just born a jerk and he's going to stay a jerk until the day he dies. But I don't know. I'm kind of reluctant to make any of the Sons of Fëanor captive because that's too... Morgoth would really pounce on that, I think. Yeah, and Marie, I agree. This is why it's so hard to choose a named character, because we do need... Notice that all the people that we've suggested so far, we want to be either in Category 1 or Category 3, right? We want them either to be hardened and strengthened by it, like we're suggesting possibly Ithilien, or we want them to be broken and weakened by it, like perhaps Orodreth, the sort of the Gwyndor model. But we haven't suggested a single active collaborator, right? Somebody who really goes over, because that's really hard to do among the named elves, right? To find somebody who's... Because they'd have to be expendable, right? Somebody who doesn't do anything. Yeah. Right, Marie, we do have Mithros already captured by Morgoth. It's true. And Mithros he's model 1, right? I mean, he's the one who escapes and is hardened by the experience, and his, resolution is increased, and his strength is even increased. His strength in battle is increased. So yeah, Mithros is the sort of archetype of captive category 1, right? But Hakan, exactly, if Morgoth captures any others of the Sons of Feanor, it's like right back to the cliffside to get stapled in again, right? I mean, he's gonna make a big example of this. It would be a huge deal, and I think it'd be too big of a deal to for him to just release them all. Yeah, but see,
maybe what if Sauron has changed has suggested a different tactic?
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, it's possible that
because recall that recall that in our slide deck we were emphasizing sort of the impact, the action of Thorondor.
Yes.
And sort of what impact that might have on Morgoth, and maybe he decides he doesn't want to call attention to himself again.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I could see something like Caranthir is captured, and they decide, like Morgoth and Sauron decide, they should like let him think that he's escaped, or maybe that like they're just convinced, like, actually we need to release this guy back into the wild because he's way too useful to us, messing up the other side, right? But Caranthir is also like the most rash of all of the Sons of Feanor, so you could easily imagine him spilling the beans, right? Magor's not going to, or Mithros rather, isn't going to talk. He's not going to give him anything about what happened or what they're trying to do or anything else. Caranthir would, right? He'd boast and he'd talk about what they did and everything, and then afterwards, Sauron could be like, "Hey, let's arrange an escape, right? Let's let him break out and think that he did so by his own strength, so that he will like be, cocky." And but yeah, we definitely want this guy out among the rest of the elves because we don't even need to prompt him for anything. He's like, this guy's a problem, right? Oh, let's let him go and be a problem for everybody else. That would be kind of interesting. And it would provide them with a source of information. And it would fit with Caranthir's character as like the one with like no restraint who spills the beans. Yeah. Yeah, Marie, you're kind of right about that. Marie says, for someone like Caranthir, you'd send Sauron in disguise to talk to him over drinks. You wouldn't capture him and torture him. Well, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. This is why I was, thinking before of wives. It's easier if we have unnamed characters who are close to the named characters, right? So because here's what I don't want to do. Okay, there are two things I don't want to do. One, I don't want to have the collaborators and spies just be red shirts, right? I don't want them to be like nameless elves who are like somewhere, like we see them off, like played by extras. Like we're not going to care, right? We should care about what's happening here, and we should be kind of invested in this. So yeah. the other thing I don't want to, so one thing I don't want to do is redshirt elves. The other thing I don't want to do is invent brand new characters, like, so that we have to do like a George R.R. Martin thing, like where we introduce a minor character and like spend an enormous amount of time building their whole backstory just so that they can like be killed and do one small thing, right? We don't have time for that. So I want them to somehow fit right into the picture. Now, Håkon suggests Argon. Brief background. Argon, of course, is not in the Silmarillion. He's one of those characters that Tolkien invented much later on. You can read about him in the history of Middle-earth, but he's not in the published Silmarillion. And he is the fourth son of Fingolfin. The fourth child, rather. The other sibling who doesn't make it into the published texts. So that is Fingon, Turgon, Arathel, and Argon being the fourth one. My problem is I'm leery to bring in too many of these. Like, even just with the characters that we have in the published Silmarillion, it's plenty, right? We have a lot of characters. So I kind of think we need to bite the bullet and do this and have this happen with a named character. But anyway, we don't have to make this decision right now. We can see how this develops over the course of time. But my question is, I think that what we really need to do is like look at all of these characters, you know, really sternly and say, what role does each one have? I think we need to be able to answer that question. I'm not about just like wanting to eliminate characters for the sake of simplifying alone. But I think we need to make sure that each character has a point. If there's not a point to each character, if there is not a really a specific role in the story that each one of these characters is destined to play at some point or other, there's really no point in having them. Yeah. Håkon, we don't have to have necessarily an active traitor. The person could be a tool. In fact, I think it would be really kind of cool if the person who was the collaborator doesn't even know that they're the collaborator, right? We don't have to have somebody who is Maegwyn, right? Who is like actively betraying them. Because in some ways, of course, I wouldn't want to ruin that, right? Maegwyn is the like greatest traitor of all time, right? In the First Age. So I would kind of like to make sure that Maegwyn's actions are worse than any of the other elves ever do, right? Yeah. Oh, I'm blanking on the exact phrasing. What's that awesome phrase that Tolkien uses in The Fall of Gondolin? Is this the spell of bottomless dread? Isn't that it? What Morgoth, like the whammy that Morgoth puts on the elves that he captures? Isn't the spell of bottomless dread, right? We totally need the spell of bottomless dread, right? Yeah, spell of bottomless dread. That's what I thought. So somebody is under the spell of bottomless dread, and they can be broken and haunted, and everybody else just thinks they're like messed up. Like, you know, they need some recuperation time, right? What if we have somebody who has had the spell of bottomless dread placed upon them and they are still hearing Morgoth's voice, Marie, in their minds, right? What if someone is even like appearing to him in his dreams? Or what if Thuringwethil is coming to him like by night? Right. And what he believes to, so he thinks he's having nightmares, but in fact, he's like betraying secrets and getting instructions, and he finds himself doing things. I mean, there can be, he should not be in his will a traitor, but still doing stuff. And he could maybe be healed, especially if we have it be Orodreth, right? He can get better, but still never be the same, right? Still always be kind of, this could explain why he's so diffident later on, and so tractable, because he doesn't trust himself anymore. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, okay. We'll think about this. We'll think about this more as we go on. But again, I want to challenge us to be thinking all of our elf characters, all of our named characters, who has, like, everybody needs a job, right? What is their job? Sooner or later, they need a job. They need to be playing a particular role. And, you know, if they're not, they're candidates for capture as far as I'm concerned. Okay. Anyway, moving on. We get the ban, Thingol responding to the kinslaying by banning the Noldor language. Yeah, well, let's keep going for a second. Okay, then the Dagor Aglareb comes. Orcs are no more use here. I love that, Marie. That's very good. Of course, being a semi-quote of swords are no more use here, Gandalf's comment in Moria, right? Orcs are no more use here, right? Which means, of course, if that's happening in episode 8, we need to have, the Sauron Gothmog thing happening in the episodes building up to that. The dreams from Ulmo come in episode 9, then, Turgon and Finrod. Then they're going to be starting to build, right? We've got the petty dwarves. See, here, I'm not sure we get a whole episode on petty dwarves. I'm thinking we need to be distributing that to some extent. I think it's one of those threads that we're going to want to be coming back to at various points, because it's going to be relevant for different moments in the story. Building of Gondolin and Nargothrond, yes. We talked about that as a connection to forgiveness and healing. Turgon moving into Gondolin, yes. And then Glaurung attacking. Agreed on the overall shape, but again, how things are actually split up. So again, notice, just looking at this outline that I'm just showing here, right? If you look at the actual events, stuff that happens, there's a small list, right? The rescue of Maedhros is an event. The abdication of Maedhros is kind of an event, but it's more like a particularly significant moment of conversation and negotiation among all of the conversations and negotiations that are happening. I wouldn't really count that. The rescue of Maedhros, the Marath Adorthad is an event. The ban is an event. That's a moment, right? The Dagor Aglareb is an event. The dreams is an event. The move to Gondolin is an event. The attack of the dragon, at the end of the dragon is an event. But that's, kind of it, right? Again, that's not to say that nothing else happens. We have lots and lots to do, but it's of a different kind. It's all, and I think it's all going to be shaped over the course of the season rather than like episode by episode, really. So that's going to be more complicated. I agree, David. We do want the petty dwarves to be established earlier, I think, because we need them in Nargothrond, right? And so that has to be Finrod's relationship with the dwarves needs to be part of what's going on there. In fact, I'm even wondering, maybe we make the dreams from Ulmo earlier. Maybe the dreams from Ulmo happen even prior to the ban. They could happen in episode 6.
Why are you thinking that?
Well, for one reason, to give more time to establish... Gondolin is going to take a while to build, right? So having the perception of much time passing and they're finally moving into Gondolin, I think, is not a bad thing. Nargothrond is going to involve, like, we've got to figure out what happened with the dwarves, right? The dwarves lived there. Meme remembers with great bitterness that the petty dwarves are booted out of Nargothrond.
Do you want to put that on screen?
The booting out of the petty dwarves?
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Do we think that is that the Noldor? Are they the ones who did it?
Yeah, they are. But like, again, I see this as part of Finrod's outreach program, right? That is with the dwarves. Because remember, the dwarves our
Finrod
story of the
PR
petty
campaign.
dwarves is that the petty dwarves are like exiled dwarves, right?
Uh-huh.
They're criminals who have been, so remember the whole theme of forgiveness works there with the dwarves as well, right? The dwarves are like, no, these people are outcast, they're dead to us. So I'm thinking like how this would go, right? Finrod, Finrod's a nice guy. He's not going to come in and be like, oh, dwarves, let me exterminate them, and colonize their lands. Like, probably that's not Finrod's response, right? So Finrod is going to be like, oh, hi, dwarves. Yeah. So I'll talk to the dwarves, and he will have heard about the dwarves that, were like, because again, Finrod is connected with Thingol as well, right? So he will have heard about Norn and their relationship with the other dwarves that we saw in season 3. So he's going to be like, oh, hey, great. I'll talk. Maybe I'll send for this Norn chap. Right. And Norn can explain the whole like business, like who are these dwarves, and maybe he can help us. Right. We've got this dwarf ambassador handy. Right. So I'll go to Thingol and I'll be like, hey, Thingol, can I borrow your dwarf ambassador? And then Norn is going to be like, oh, yeah, no, those are not our people. Those people are dead to us. And he's going to be like, oh, OK, what do we do now? So, we get the whole thing working here. How exactly this happens, I don't know. That is, what happens with the petty dwarves in Nargothrond, and how does that transaction end up happening? I have the faintest idea. I keep talking about like the dwarf plot, and I don't know what it is yet. That's not clear to me at all. And now is not the time to decide that. The point is, there's stuff that needs to happen there, right? This whole transaction with Finrod and the dwarves, and perhaps actually my use of the word transaction there suggests the solution. Right. That is, he pays them. We also know Finrod is loaded, right? He's got more treasure than anybody else. So I'm thinking he's going to buy them. He's going to buy Nargothrond from them.
I like it.
But Meme is going to like not get any of the proceeds. So he's going to still feel ripped off. And when there's treasure involved, maybe the mainstream dwarves are like, actually, maybe we are interested after all. And the other dwarves the petty dwarves going to be like, we thought we were dead to you. And anyway, there's a lot we can do there, right? But nevertheless, okay, anyway, whatever. The point is, there's stuff that needs to happen with Finrod and the dwarves here before we can even start the building of Nargothrond. So I don't know. I'm not 100% set on pushing the dreams up earlier. But here's another question. The fact that we've always done it this way doesn't mean it always has to be. But for all 3 seasons that we've had so far, we've had a sort of climactic turning point in the middle, right? A turning point which has really been sort of the pivot of the season. It was the burning of the lamps in season 1. It was the release of Melkor. Really the sort of the shifting of the scene to Valinor and the release of Melkor from prison in season 2. It was the burning of the ships in season 3. There seems to me 3 candidates for that role here among the things we're describing. 4 candidates. The one which seems most natural in a sense is the Dagor Aglareb. But it's the one I like least. I mean, having the battle that happens in the middle of the season be the like pivot point outwardly seems to make sense. But the Dagor Aglareb is not actually. It's kind of a. I don't know, not a blind. It's a false. Right. I mean, yeah. It's not really. It's not as big a deal as it seems to be. Right. So I don't think that works. So that's one, but again, I don't think that's a great one. There's the dreams from Ulmo, is another one. There's the ban, right? Thingol's ban of the Noldor, and there's potentially Mareth Adderthad, but I think that's probably too early. But like the Feast of Reconciliation conceptually is another thing that could serve as sort of the pivot point, something that we're building up to for the whole first half of the season is about like, come on everybody, we can get along, right? And then boom, the Mareth Adderthad, the Feast of Reconciliation is the culmination of the early efforts, right, to get everybody to get along. I could see that. And then the ban would then be part of the decline in the second half of the season. But I don't know. So we've got Chris and Hakan are both suggesting the ban as the sort of turning point. But how, though? How does it serve as such? I don't see how... I mean, there's no question that it's a momentous event. But I don't see how it serves as the pivot of the story. Because what pivots exactly? In season 1, the destruction of the lamps was so important because that was the moment when Melkor broke with the rest of the Valar, right? We were like trying to work together, and even Melkor believed that maybe because maybe he could get them all to see sense and obey him, right? Maybe all of the Valar would agree to share his vision and accept him as their lord, as is natural and appropriate, right? So that was still kind of the place where Melkor was in the first half of season 1. The burning of when he burns the lamps, he kind of burns his bridges, right? That's where the lines are drawn clearly. Melkor over here and the Valar over here, and that's literally then represented geographically, right, by the separation between Valinor and Utumno that we did in the second half of the season. So then we still have, in the second half of the season, attempts to reconcile across that gulf, and by manway at least, to bridge that gulf. And then, of course, in the end, we find that it's not. So what happens at the end of the season is sort of the fulfillment of what we saw at the turning point in the middle, right? When the gulf is unbridgeable and war is declared. So that really works as a central pivot point for that whole season in that way. In season 2, the release from prison of Melkor is obviously changes the entire game, right? I mean, that's the... the question is the question of season 2, right, is where do elves really belong and what should they be doing? Like, what are elves called to do and how can they fulfill their calling? And we see the call to Valinor and some of them choosing to stay. But of course, the whole question of what are you, like, where are you to be, like, where may your heart rest and what should you be doing gets complicated by Melkor, right? And Melkor takes those doubts and questions and turns them against the Noldor and brings about we have, instead of just us trying to find our place and figuring out what we're doing in the world, Melkor turns that into unrest, right? And discontentment and ultimately rebellion. So again, that moment is the turning point of that central theme. And the second half of the season really flows from it and is in a sense almost like the inverse of the first half of the season. The first half of the season is about everybody finding their place, right? Different people finding their place in different places until we get to Valinor, and the rest of them are over in Valinor, and everybody's kind of content, right? Everybody has found the place where they belong. And then the second half of the season, people are getting discontent and wishing they could be somewhere else. So again, that works. Clear pivot point. The burning of the ships works differently, right? But again, with the burning of the ships, we have, this is the arrival in Middle-earth, now that this is the final turning point for Feanor, right? This is where Feanor is completely over the edge, right? When he burns the ships and, as I've always argued, that the burning of the ships is the worst thing that Feanor ever did, worse even than the kinslaying. It's sort of the final atrocity, which shows not only that he's willing to do horrible things in order to pursue his end, but also that he's really quite mad in thinking that he can do this without the support of his brother and more than half of his people. So that, the first half is kind of, with the story of the Noldor is sort of building towards that. the burning of the ships doesn't serve as neatly as a pivot point for the whole season, in that it's not directly connected, of course, to the story, the Balerion story and the story of the Sindar. But still, it kind of works. My problem is neither the Merith Atherthad nor the Ban individually kind of tell the whole story, and neither of them really serves as that same kind of pivot, right? When we're thinking about the shape of the season as a whole. If we treat the Ban as that kind of pivot, then we need to show how, like, the trajectory is one of like increasing cooperation and harmony, and then we get the Ban, then we find out about the Ban, and then we get what? Decreasing harmony? Okay, wait. There's one way I can think about this that makes sense. The only way I can make sense of that as the pivot point. Okay. What if, thinking about the terms we were talking about earlier on, reconciliation and forgiveness, right? What if the first half of the season is focused on reconciliation? Let's all work together. Let's all get along, right? Let's just agree not to fight. And indeed, let's even achieve the high goal of agreeing to fight together against the enemy rather than against each other, right? Can we all do that, people? Right? That's the theme. And the Merith Atherthad is the centerpiece of that, right? Hey, it's the celebration of us all deciding not to fight each other. Isn't that awesome, right? Great. Then the truth is revealed, and we know that it's not just a question of reconciliation. There's forgiveness that needs to happen, right? The challenges to working together, the challenges to living in peace, the challenges to coming together as like a unified people against Morgoth are even greater than we knew at the beginning. So that the first half of the season, again, is focused on reconciliation, and then the second half is on like, okay, really mending the breach, healing and reconciliation that needs to happen beyond healing and forgiveness that needs to happen beyond mere reconciliation. I could see it working in that way. But if we did that, the dreams from Ulmo would have to be kind of, and the response to them, that is the building of Nargothrond and Gondolin, would have to be more explicitly tied to that forgiveness theme, which is already what I was thinking earlier on, so I guess that would work. We could even work the dwarf plot with Finrod into this as well. That's what Finrod wants to do. Finrod doesn't just want to... You know how Finrod wants to get rid of the petty dwarves that are living in Nargothrond? He wants to reconcile them to the dwarves of their homeland and repatriate them back to the Blue Mountains. Because that's what they really want anyway, maybe. Or some of them do. So he's going to try to work out a reconciliation between the two. And maybe he's partially successful. But then there will be some, like Meme, who are going to... I don't know. Just a thought. Okay. All right. I think we can do that. Any other thoughts that you guys have about these kinds of general shape and trajectory of the season questions?
This is looking pretty solid.
It is. Oh, wait, here's
we
another...
began the podcast saying that basically, in not so many words, not much happens, but actually a lot happens.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, wait, one thought, though. I think I want to switch the Dagor Aglareb and the Ban. Let's have the Dagor Aglareb happen first. The Dagor Aglareb can be the culmination of the reconciliation, right? Like the heart of the reconciliation is the Merith Atherthad. So the whopping victory by the elves in the Dagor Aglareb would seem to be like, hey, look, it's reconciliation working out, right? Everything is peachy. See, didn't I tell you, if we all work together, that, like, there's no Morgoth can't possibly stand against us if we all work together. And then, bam, Look at that. It happened, right? This is a plan in action, right? This is what victory tastes like, people. See? And then the news leaks, right? Then we got the kinslaying, and it looks like having looked like everything had come together and been really beautiful, now everything after that is really falling apart, right? Looks like it's going to really fall apart, so that the dreams from Ulmo would then have a role in being like, okay, let's kind of somehow get back to where we were. Yeah. Hakan is suggesting the people who escaped from Angband could do so during the Dagor Aglareb. Yeah, possibly. I got to think about that. There's much more I need to think about with the plans of Sauron and the folks who are captured. Okay, all right. Let's think a little bit more about some of these storylines we've already thought about, so we'll just be touching on some of these things. Okay, so villain storylines. We talked about the Sauron Gothmog thing, which I think will work out really well. The capture of elves, which we'll think about more later on. The making of dragons, which hey, so Sauron has been the guy who's been doing this kind of thing already, right? In one sense, the dragons are like the ultimate version of Sauron's werewolf project, right? So what if Sauron kind of considers himself as like the pioneer of the technology that Morgoth perfects in the dragons, right? So Sauron wouldn't necessarily be directly involved. It would be Morgoth's project to make Glaurung, but Sauron kind of feels like, you know, he kind of held the patent, right, on the process, and that he can kind of like tell himself that Morgoth is following in his footsteps. Yeah, that kind of works. Now, the big question is the awakening of men. Now, we know that Morgoth is going to be involved in the corruption of men out in Hildorian. We had decided in the last episode that we shouldn't show that. We don't want to show that on screen. We want to have men show up kind of haunted by their past and with vague stories. But since we're showing the villains, we might want to handle that. Hey, okay, Morgoth should go away, because we know Morgoth leaves himself, right? Morgoth should go to tempt the humans personally, which means we don't show that, but we show the fact that Morgoth is absent. Maybe Morgoth is absent during the Dagor Aglareb, and so it's during Morgoth's absence that Sauron manipulates and goads Gothmog into attacking. And so then the Dagor Aglareb happens, and it's a complete catastrophe from the bad guy's standpoint, and then Morgoth comes back, and Sauron's like, he did it. I'm like, man, like, Gothmog totally blew your whole orc reserve while you were gone, and it was incredibly lame, and I told him not to do it. Right. Yeah, exactly. Oh, good. Hakan was just thinking the same thing. Yeah, exactly. I think that would work really well. So yeah, I love the idea of having Morgoth absent, and we're not going to say exactly what maybe there'll be some dark hints about what he's doing. But let's have him go himself instead of sending Sauron, because then Sauron can be kind of running things in his absence. And then when he comes back, when Morgoth comes back, is when he kicks off the dragon project. Right. Yes. Yeah. Okay. All right. That'll be good. So the capturing of elves and the enthralling and releasing them can be Sauron's strategy initially, right? But then again, maybe that Morgoth comes back in time to, to put them under the spell of bottomless dread. So again, he has like some, he's going to be, as he generally is, a little bit more hardcore than Sauron is in his approach there. Okay. All right. The kinslaying reveal. Okay. So, by the way, what I'm doing here, obviously, I'm not trying to resolve all these things. My goal here in thinking through these different storylines right now is just to kind of flag stuff we need to think about, right? Stuff that decisions we're going to need to make later on. So the kinslaying reveal. Galadriel and Angrod are involved in telling the main parts. Yes. There are rumors floating about, which I think can be circulated by Sauron and his servants, either in disguise, himself in disguise, Thuringwethil in disguise. I think he and Thuringwethil should both be able to disguise themselves as elves and go about spreading rumors. Celeborn. Here's what I like most about having the primary theme of the season be forgiveness. It gives Celeborn something to do. I have an answer to the question, why does Galadriel marry this chump? Right? I have an answer to the question. The answer is because he forgives her, and he helps her to forgive herself. Galadriel needs him personally. It's not what he accomplishes. It's not because he's so awesome. And he is wise, and he's older than she is, and he remembers Cuiviénen, and she will respect him. But it's painfully obvious that he's not her equal, right? So why does Galadriel marry down? And that kind of personal backstory, right? Just like that he is so important because Celeborn deserves to be her husband because he's the one who helps her through this, right? I think this is one of the core stories of Galadriel through this whole thing. She is still haunted by the kinslaying, right? By her own feeling of guilt, by her mother's death, right? She is haunted by this, and she can't forgive herself. And she's going to end up confessing to Celeborn. I think she confesses the whole truth to Celeborn. She tells part of the truth to Melian. I think she confesses the whole truth to Celeborn. I think Celeborn is the first of the Sindar to know about the whole kinslaying, but he doesn't tell Thingol, because he's keeping her private torment private, right? He sort of keeps it in confidence when she tells him about it. And he immediately sees that his job, what he needs to do is to help her through this. So he does help her through this. And they end up getting married, and their marriage is the moment of healing for her, right? This is when she becomes sort of whole. Hakan, I think she tells him before the ban. I think he finds out before Thingol does. I think that would make it even more dramatic, his choice, right? Because she's going to be thinking, she's going to be like, you're going to have to tell Thingol, and I'm going to be the traitor of the Noldor. So she'd be even feeling guilty about confessing it to him, right? Or anyway, there would be more at stake for both of them. I do think we can have Celeborn not say anything. In that situation, I totally think we can. It's kind of like a confessional sort of moment, right? And he doesn't want to. It would be a personal betrayal of Galadriel, right? If he goes and tells Thingol, and he banishes her, that's a lot of progress in helping this, this woman through her problems, right? I'm going to blab on you and get you exiled, right? No, he wouldn't do that. He wouldn't do that. Hakan, they can hesitate. Their marriage can happen after the ban. Their marriage can totally happen after the ban. In fact, I really kind of like that as an example of Celeborn standing up to Thingol, right? Celeborn's okay, Thingol, we've been friends for a long time and stuff, but you know what? I'm going to up and marry a Noldo, right? I'm just going to do it, right? I don't know. I kind of like that. So, I think her confession predates the ban, but Celeborn's proposal of marriage postdates it. Like the final healing and reconciliation doesn't happen until afterwards, but her initial confession happens first. That's what I'm thinking. But anyway, so I think the Galadriel-Celeborn relationship is all tied up in the reveal of the kinslaying. Right, Håkon wants them to be in love at first sight, though. Sure. Yeah. No, that's fine. I'm cool with that. Certainly. I mean, I think that Celeborn should be following her around like a little puppy dog from when he first sees her. I mean, there's no question, right? There's no question that Celeborn is absolutely, head over heels for Galadriel from the very beginning. And she will come to respect him and to be grateful to him for like helping her, right? And she characterizes her own inner healing and peace of mind as a gift that she has given him. So that when she says later on that Celeborn is a giver of great gifts, we know that that's still what she's remembering, right? Yep. No, this works. This so works. This so works. Okay, more. Lthien. Okay, totally agree with Marie here. This is important, right? Okay, so she remains in Doriath throughout the first season. Now, the challenge is, I agree with Marie's point at the very end there, it is essential that we work her into the Doriath plot. She can't just be singing and brushing her hair and waiting around for Beren over this next 2 seasons, right? We need a role for Lthien. Agreed. What is that role? I don't know. I do agree that we do need Dairon's intentions towards her to be clear. And I remember we were talking in the last season that there should be this sort of like expectation, like Dairon and Lthien should be like 2 peas in a pod. They should be like, they're eventually getting together and marrying should seem completely inevitable to everybody, like not even worth discussing. Everyone assumes that that's sooner or later going to happen. So yeah, but that's not enough, right? Obviously, we can't have Lthien just be like, "Hi, I am the like female lead who is whose character is completely invested in the men who are interested in me." We need her to have some kind of independent life in these 2 seasons. But it's super hard because she never goes anywhere or does anything in the Silmarillion until Beren comes along. We made a start with having her be involved in repelling the spiders when Shelob attacked in season 3. Håkon, I agree she probably doesn't like the ban. We can make her outspoken against the ban. She might think that even her mother doesn't go far enough. I mentioned the ban as the first instance of Thingol not really fully taking to heart what his wife tells him. His daughter can be even more outspoken against it, perhaps. Agreed. Do we want her to leave? Can we bring her to the feast? Can we bring her to the Marath Adarthad? I mean, is there a good reason for us not to? Having her stay at home seems to me one of the problems. Because, let's face it, not too much happens in Doriath. And if we want to put a lot of focus on the Galadriel and Celeborn story, they are going to be a huge part of what happens in Doriath. So Lthien is going to seem like an afterthought to some extent. She's going to play second fiddle to them. Thingol might object to Lthien attending the Marath Adarthad Marie. I agree, but Thingol does that, right? It doesn't mean people listen to him. But yeah,
seems to me like the fix for Lthien is to have her go places and do things.
Yeah, have her be involved. But we have to think more about her role. more about her character. Like, who is she? What does she want? What is she into? What's her stand? Yes, it makes all kinds of sense for Thingol to be like protective of her, right? But if him forbidding her to leave and her wanting to go, I mean, that's an obvious anticipation of what's going to happen, right? So like when Thingol is like, all right, kid, that's it, I'm locking you up the tree, right? When we get to that in season 6, it will seem like the culmination of the kind of tension that's been going on. I don't want to make Lthien just the rebellious teenager of the Elvish world, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not sure what to make her do. We'll have to think about this. But here's one other thing that I want to think about with Lthien. What's the relationship between Lthien and Galadriel? They've got to have a relationship, don't they? If Galadriel comes in and she's like, okay, I'm going to like sit at the feet of Melian, right? I'm going to be like a little Melian disciple here. What is, like, are they rivals in some sense? Are they, like, wouldn't that mean that Lthien and Galadriel either have to be rivals or BFFs or something, right? I mean, they have to relate to each other.
I think this is a promising direction for giving her something to do.
Mm-hmm.
Also, this is an excellent opportunity to pass the Bechdel test.
Right. A conversation between Lthien and Galadriel and Melian, not involving men. Yeah. Well, Lthien, or rather Galadriel and Melian do pass the Bechdel test in the Silmarillion.
Yeah, that's true. Good point.
So
they don't talk about men, they talk about murder.
They talk about murder, exactly. They talk about politics, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure. I don't know what the right direction to go in yet, but I'm actually, like, all of a sudden very excited about a Lthien Galadriel like relationship and storyline.
Yeah.
Seems pretty cool.
It seems to me like an obvious possibility, right? And think about this, right? Arwen is the parallel to Lthien. Like, all right, Arwen is the second Lthien, and we've got Arwen living with Galadriel. So, like, think about Galadriel in the sense of, like, okay, so my granddaughter is like the second Lthien, right? So here I have a chance to, like, do it again, right? Maybe. Anyway, it would be. I agree. I think there's a lot of potential there. I don't know what to do with it either, but that's got to be, it almost has to be a thing some way or another, the Lthien Galadriel relationship, and we need to, but I feel like I can't figure out how to develop that until I know more about Lthien, right? We've really got to think about Luthien's character. Anyway, we've got Eol, the Eol storyline. Now, he's not a huge prominent character, but the thing about Eol's character is that there is on the one hand, we need to set up his character for one major reason and one minor reason, right? The major reason being obviously setting up the story between the relationship between him and Aravel, which is not going to happen in this season, but would happen in season 5. And the minor reason is that we need to introduce him so that we can get Anglachel the sword and know where it comes from and why it's sketchy, so that when Beleg says, oh, hey, I want that sword, we should all be like, no, Beleg. We don't even need Melian to say her piece before we're all like, not that sword, Beleg. So, we need to set up Eol. And we flirted. No, it was a pretty heavy flirtation with including Eol in season 3. He was the one that we kept like putting off, and then we ended up just bumping him out of the season entirely. But clearly it's time for him now. But the other thing about Eol, apart from those two story reasons, like we need him to be the maker of Anglachel and we need him to be the father of Maegwyn, we also, like, he's an awesome foil. I mean, thematically, he's important, even though plot-wise, he's not super important, right? So the way that I was already talking about playing him and his little dark kingdom off against Turgon and his little light kingdom, right, is already one way. With bringing in Amros is another, sort of point in that triangle, I think is interesting. and he works super well with the forgiveness theme on the season because he is super bitter. Like he is like the example. Like, you know, if you don't repent of what you do wrong and you don't forgive people for wrongs done to you, you end up like Eol, man. Like, who wants that, right? So. Yeah, and Hakan, I agree. If we're going to have a dwarf storyline, he's got to be involved somehow. He's the one that's most connected with the dwarves. So I think that he can also play a role in the... And remember, he's also resentful against the Noldor, right? He resents the heck out of the Noldor coming in and claiming the lands. He's like the petty elf, right? He's like the meme of the elves in some ways, right? So I think he's got to be involved in the whole Finrod situation, right? Finrod and the dwarves, like Eol needs to be involved so that he can resent Finrod and the Noldor for it, right? In addition. So, yeah, Tony was just suggesting he's got to be involved in turning the petty dwarves against Finrod. Yeah. I think he's got to somehow kind of mess that up. He needs to be somehow involved. So there's stuff for Eol to do that we need to do with him. So, yep, lots of things to do. Do we want to have a whole Eol episode? Again, I don't think so, because I think that his stuff is distributed. Like, it's going to be connected to different parts of the story, I think. So I don't think we want them all at once. I think we need to spread them out. Hakan says he's like Meme's legal advisor. Yeah, really, really bad legal advisor. And, okay, Galadriel, we already talked about Galadriel specifically. Yeah. So when does their marriage happen? I think their marriage happens near the end of the season. I think it's, in fact, we could even have that as like so the sort of focal points of like forgiveness. We should end the season with the signs of hope, right? So we have like reconciliation, let's work together, and hey, Dagor Agaloreb, this is really panning out. And then we have, but we have much deeper problems, right? And there needs to be forgiveness. And so, okay, how can we patch these much more serious problems that we now have now that the whole kinslaying thing has come out into the open? And we have already Nargothrond. I was suggesting Nargothrond and Gondolin serve as kind of beacons of hope, right? Examples of like, here's how we can move past this. These are two different examples of what real forgiveness looks like and what moving forward looks like, right? Galadriel and Celeborn's marriage can be a third, leg to that particular stool, right? That also is what forgiveness looks like, I think. Yeah. Murray's asking about Eol. Do we need to know where he came from or how he knows the dwarves? Yeah, well, he was there. We need to kind of connect the dots a little bit, right? Because we had him involved in season 2, episode 3, right? Back in the conflict, in the debate about leaving Cuiviénen. So we need to do that. And yeah, Hakan, exactly. Then their honeymoon is going to be interrupted by the attack of the dragon, or it'll happen while they're gone, right? They return from their honeymoon and they're like, "What? We leave and a dragon attacks? What the heck?" Yeah, exactly. They're off on their honeymoon when Glaurung attacks. It's all good. Okay, all right. Some notes on some other characters to introduce. Eol, right? Talked about that. Glorfindel and Ecthelion. Yeah, we're going to meet them in Nevrest. Don't know for sure what they can do. Having Ecthelion captured and escaped would be one way to introduce his character, of course. Glorfindel, of course. Both of them should be obviously close to Turgon and very heavily involved in the Gondolin story, so there's plenty of time to develop them some as we're moving forward with the Gondolin plot in the second half of the season at the very least. Zirak. Zirak is the one of the dwarf characters we're talking about, the smith. Yeah, well, we got to think through some dwarf characters because we're going to, in addition to Meme, whom I think we can, is it stretching a point too much to introduce Meme? I mean, I know time's going to be passing and he'd be pretty old, but I don't know. Can we get away with it? we could just have Meme be at the very least, we need like Meme's dad or granddad or somebody, right? I mean, we need, Meme to, we want to have a direct connection to Meme here. But anyway, whatever. A grown-up Idril, right? We've seen juvenile Idril in the crossing of the Helcaraxa. We need Idril to be all grown up there at the feast. Yeah. Ignor's wife. Well, I want to think about that more. I might want to cut her, but we'll see. Orodreth's wife. Yeah. Oh, it's Angrod's wife. Yeah, okay. That's what I thought. I was puzzled there for a second. Yes, Angrod's wife. Yeah, Angrod's wife, who has a name. Yeah, it makes her a candidate for a captivity in Angband in my book, but we'll see. Yeah. And you're right. Yeah, we do need reasons. We need to figure out the Sindar who move out, because we're going to have, we must have a bunch of Sindar move to Nevrast, right, and live with Turgon, and then eventually move to Gondolin. And we're going to want the Sindar who move up to Hithlum too. So we do need some reasons behind that. And I think that those can be well, Nevrast obviously has to be, but I think both of them can be first half of the season stories. Okay, so here's my question as we're closing up here. And Dave, I'd be interested to hear what you think about this.
Great.
What if we approached this season differently? What if instead of going episode by episode, we go storyline by storyline? Think through each storyline individually. Like have one session per storyline in which we really flesh it out, like the arc of that particular thread over the course of the whole season. And then have a couple sessions at the end where we hammer this together into an outline on the whole. Because I'm kind of feeling like it's going to be... And I know, David, you're right. I mean, I am thinking of our script outlining folks, and if we don't have... Like, it's hard for them to start working on that in advance if we don't... like, they would have to follow the same kind of pattern that we're following in doing that. I don't know. I'm just thinking, going episode by episode... It's going to be, I feel like we're going to end up backtracking a lot, right? As if we don't, because it's going to be hard to consider all of these storylines in parallel as we go through. It just seems to me, when I think about this season, if I just think about it, like, okay, if I were writing this story, like if somebody tasked me personally with coming up with the screenplay for this season, that's how I would do it. How I would do it is I would think through each plot line to say, what do I want to happen? And then I would say, how can we shape these things so that they best fit together and overlap and build up and work together best? That's how I'd do it. And so that's how I'm inclined to do it when we discuss our way through. Just because, again, there's so little... I mean, episode 1 makes sense, right? But like from episode 2 on, I'm already not sure which plot lines we want to focus on. I mean, like just going back there for a second. Just taking a few examples. Where's the line here? Okay. So we're talking about episode 1, the rescue of Maedhros. Episode 5, the feast, the Merith Adarthad, right? The Feast of Reconciliation. A bunch of stuff that needs to happen in episodes 2, 3, and 4, right? And if we just kind of... we need to start the Galadriel and Celeborn story. We need to start the Galadriel and Lthien story. We need to get Lthien involved in stuff. We need to start the Eöl story. That should probably begin somewhere during there in that early stage. We need to work on the Feanorians and the people of Fingolfin. That can't just be all solved in one episode, right? And because anyway, we've got like then Caranthir and everybody smacking Caranthir afterwards, and there's still lots of stuff to do there with we've got to establish Amras, right, as the the conscience of the Fëanorians, who then leaves at some point, right? We need to establish the bad guy storyline. Morgoth has to go off on his sabbatical, and Sauron has to start his project. Elves need to start getting captured and tortured during this session so that they can be released no later than the Marath Adderthad, right? Maybe one of them shows up to the Marath Adderthad, and that's like where we introduce that, or at the very least right afterwards. But they've got to be they've got to be worked on by the bad guys during that time. And of course, we've got the scheming throughout this. We also have the scheming of the manipulation of Gothmog, right? That also needs to be happening there during that section. So when we sit down to say, like, okay, now let's talk about episode 2, like, how do we know which of those threads we pick up when we don't even know all the details of what, like, when we haven't even decided what Luthien's character is going to be like yet? Or, it's hard for me to see how we'd proceed episode by episode as we go through that. You see what I mean? So what if we did this?
It's definitely tricky. Like, I think we definitely need to break, as much as possible, break the arcs. The overall arcs out first, before we start going episode by episode.
Yeah.
I mean, because I don't think there's any winning here.
Yeah,
I think if we go storyline by storyline, we're gonna end up doing that. We're gonna be backtracking to the extent that we're gonna be trying to align the storylines. We're gonna be like, okay, now this is where so and so.
Yes.
The minute we're discussing a storyline, we're like, okay, this person interacts with this other character from a storyline we broke last time.
Yes.
We have to start trying to align things.
Yes. And we're going to be continually realigning and revising things as we develop the other storylines.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, we're just out of luck.
Yeah. It's just the nature of this, we don't have the big difference between this and most of the other seasons, and I would include season 1. I mean, Nick was kind of teasing me about that when I was saying this season is so different, and he was like, as opposed to season 1, which was chock full of events. And it's true, season 1 was similar too, but even there was a clearer direction, right? Mm-hmm. We had a more unified overarching trajectory of the season to work with than we do here in season 4. So let's see what you guys think of this. We have a buffer. And when I say you guys, I mean our script writing team and other folks on the discussion boards, because moving back up to in the next session, which is 2 weeks from now on November 16th, I want to talk about the frame. We haven't talked about the frame at all. So we're going to talk about the frame next time. And I'm ready to talk about the frame completely from scratch. Who's the teller? Who's the primary character of the frame, and what's the plot and scope of the frame? Right now, I have zero idea. I have no clue. I'm coming in with no investment whatsoever in the frame. I'm like ready to start from scratch on the drawing board. So really interested to hear people's suggestions on the frame. Then maybe we can kind of revisit this. Well, before we then go, after we talk about the frame, will be time to sort of then move ahead with other issues for the season and maybe starting to work our way through things. So we have a buffer in this way to give people some. So if you guys on the discussion boards and the script outlining team can kind of talk amongst yourselves and see what you think. Would you rather us try to go episode by episode at the very great risk of our getting to episode 4 and saying, okay, we want to actually go back and completely change episode 2 because now that we've worked out this other plot line, we see we really really want to have planted that back in episode 2. So I think that's going to almost inevitably happen, that we're going to end up backtracking continuously if we try to march through episode by episode. Or would you guys be willing to be more flexible, have us go storyline by storyline, and then be working it out? Or even, leaving the outline team themselves to be kind of putting that together. Maybe that's how it works. Maybe you guys do that. Maybe we work through the storylines and leave you guys to plan out the episodes, and then you guys can suggest the episode, the full like episode outlines, and then we can talk through the episode outlines like we do and criticize what you've said, because that's much easier for us, frankly. So that's a kind of an attractive idea. If you guys can be working out the outlines as we go, thinking through the outlines as we go, and we'll just go storyline by storyline. Yeah. I kind of like that idea. Anyway, see what you guys think. Let us know what you guys. So next time we'll start with that. We'll just kind of say what the plan's going to be, and then we'll talk about the frame. Okay. All right. Sounds like a plan. And so be thinking, of course, about the frame too. Who do you want the frame to be? Do we want to do a Hobbit frame? We haven't done a Hobbit frame in a while, or ever, actually. Ever. Yeah. We've had 2 Aragorn frames and 1 Arwen frame so far. Do we want a Hobbit frame? Do we want a Sam frame? Do we want a Bilbo frame? Do we want to go back to Arwen for this one? What do we want to do? I don't know. Do we want to do something totally different?
We definitely need to find a character for whom the theme of forgiveness will resonate.
Exactly. Yeah. It's gotta be about the theme. It's gotta fit. Yep, those are the questions. Okay, so
maybe it's Sam forgiving Ted Sandyman.
I like it. And Arwen on Twitch suggests it should be a Tom Bombadil frame. Tom Bombadil forgiving Goldberry for dunking him in the water. And then the marriage of Goldberry and Tom Bombadil is the parallel for the marriage of Galadriel and Celeborn. I like it in Arwen. I think it totally works. Yeah. Yeah. As if you want like a dynamic character who really grows and progresses, Tom Bombadil's your go-to right there, right? I mean, you got.
That's true.
Absolutely. No more dynamic character than Tom Bombadil. The guy who never even changes his jacket. Anyway, never mind. Okay. So thanks everybody for this discussion here today. This was super fun. I'm pretty excited about this season now. I'm there's lots to do here, and it's a totally different kind of challenge than we've had before, and I think that's going to be really interesting. So I'm excited to see what we produce. This is like this is the most uncharted territory we've been in since season 1, right? Where we're, filling in like the human story behind, not human, of course, that's a poor choice of term. The personal stories behind of Beleriand and its realms, right? That's going to be super fun.
Personal stories behind.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm really looking forward to this Nargothrond dwarf thing.
Yeah.
I like the idea of it. I like the idea of there being a purchase, and I really think we need to make it like we should take a page from America's sordid history.
Yeah.
And have it be a case where they're just totally screwing them over.
Or at least that's how it looks to the dwarves, right?
Yeah.
Or at least to some of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think there should be some like good intentions that are misconstrued, but then there are other people who don't have good intentions. Like we totally need to have Caranthir hunting the dwarves. Caranthir and Celegorm hunting dwarves, contributing to the misunderstandings. No, so much material there. But anyway, all right. Gonna let everybody go. See you guys in 2 weeks on November 16th to resolve our plan for our strategy for the season and to talk about the frame. So thanks everybody.
We're really moving rapidly.
Oh
we?
Yeah, no, this is good. This is good, as we are wont to do on the Film Project. Yes. Excellent. So thanks for listening, everyone, and Godspeed.